That was
Yeah,
the
go
that was
ahead.
the trip there, Brandon. Okay, so
Oh
on the
man.
trip back, the government of Canada was requiring the three major airports of entry, Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, that I, at my own expense, grab a hotel room for 3 nights, and then following that, do 14 days of self-isolation where I phone them like I'm phoning the school teacher every morning to report in that I'm still in my residence. So when I arrive at, first I get a test in Panama, so I have the paper to get on the plane. And I arrive at Toronto International Airport, and I arrive at immigration. So it is my understanding that when I arrive at a port of entry, the only people who need to see my passport is immigration. So I show immigration my passport. They grant me access to my country, right, that I live in. I now come next to the Health Canada checkpoint. There's three Ontario provincial police officers there, two short ones and a tall one to balance those two out. And at the Health Canada girls like, can I see your passport? And I said, what do you want to see my passport for? You're Health Canada. I have no business with you. She goes, well, everyone has to get a COVID test. I said, I already got one in Panama. I don't need another one. I'm here now. And she goes, well, you have to quarantine. I said, no, I don't. And to make a long story short, I went through the whole talk there. She had a claim against me and she was trying to impede me from going about my business, that she needed to put it in writing. I needed to know who she was. Could I please have her name and her address? She didn't want to give me that. And,
All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of my More Laws, More Problems video show. I just made a contact recently with my friend Max here. We've been chatting a little bit before the show. We met through the Beartaria Times app, which is Owen Benjamin's thing. We both think he's hilarious, and we both found solace in his comedy. And we also have something else in common, and that is a great respect for the law. So I figured I'd bring him on to talk about what he knows and about some of his experiences. So welcome, Max. How are you?
Great, Brandon. Good to be here, and happy to maybe unpack some of the confusion around what the law is.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's one of these things that have been a hot topic lately, not only because of what's going on in the world due to certain sicknesses and stuff, and people wanting to maintain their rights, but also just everyday stuff, driving a car, traffic tickets, the police interactions, codes. We were talking a little bit before about people wanting to add onto their houses and build homesteads, and they're worried about local codes and zoning. But
Right.
don't they own the property though? This doesn't make sense.
Well, okay, let's jump in there. So,
Yeah.
um, under in law, if you enter into contracts with people, then you're bound by those contracts, right? So when you sign a mortgage, you're bound by that contract with the lender. And the lender will have conditions. And some of the conditions will be that you follow the code because they're trying to protect their investment. Okay. So if you want to be free of the mortgage lender's restrictions on what it is you want to do on your land, then don't borrow money from them. The easiest way to do the things you want to do on a piece of land is to first own that land free and clear, and then to have no debt. Um, that's going to be that's going to allow you to sidestep a lot of issues. And then learning, as I tell people, that may be unavoidable in some instances, like seeking a jurisdiction where they're the least intrusive is going to be very helpful to you, right? Because if you go into a city, you're going to be bound by tons of code, and they want you on the grid. They've spent all the money putting in the plumbing and the electrical and everything. The last thing they want is you moving in and not using it. That doesn't help them at all. Whether that infrastructure is done smartly or not is not really a question, or whether it's sustainable, they don't care. Um, it's also not necessarily a bad thing to be hooked up to that infrastructure when you're in a city. It might be the easiest way to get rid of your waste, But if you want to do it your way, then get out in the country, own your land free and clear, and build small. Start small and build from there. And then if you're faced with code enforcement, learn their rules better than they know them themselves. Because a lot of times you'll run into enforcement agents that actually don't have a good understanding of the rules, right? So grab the code book, grab your dictionary, because words have meaning, and understand what it is that they're trying to do. Because often if you understand the problem, you can get around the problem, right? And I always say, like, people are just out earning a living. These code enforcement people, the guy you're borrowing money from the bank, they're all just people trying to earn a living, and they will help you. Like the what is it? The four most powerful words in the English language are "Can you help me?" Right?
Yeah.
How do we turn? And then how do you turn a no into a yes? And it's simply by asking that question. So when you get in front of someone and they tell you no, you can't do that, and you go, well, what's the blockage here? You know, like, how do I turn this no into a yes? And it can often be that simple. And then there's the other end of the scale where you're just going to run into you pick the wrong jurisdiction and the wrong cowboy, and you're going to have nothing but trouble on your build. So that's the easy answer.
Yeah, I think a lot has to do with that, where you find yourself and how you carry yourself. Because from what I've seen, I don't know, some people might think this is kind of like a one size fits all fixed answer for everything, where I see it more as like kind of the Jedi mind trick power, where it doesn't exactly work on everybody. But if you have a smile on your face and you conduct yourself
Right.
fairly and stay in honor, you know, most times it's going to work out for you.
Exactly. So that's a lesson I had to learn the hard way in court, because when I first got into this whole I don't deserve this ticket and I'm going to fight it, and I didn't understand what venue I was in when I showed up. I was at a hearing. I thought that's where I got a chance to speak my piece, but it wasn't. A hearing simply where you're telling the magistrate how you want to proceed. Are you pleading guilty or not guilty or something else? And I was very frustrated because I had a story to tell, and I didn't get to tell it, and I didn't understand that's not the place you tell that story, right? And I went about that for a number of years, going to court, where I would get into screaming matches at some point with the judges and the magistrates and be surrounded by sheriffs. You know, when you learn to stay in honor and speak with respect and understand what you're doing, you know that you can have right on your side all you want. You can have the law on your side and still lose, because they have the power and you don't. But they're much more willing to be on your side or to help you if you're showing them the deference that you should, right? I mean, without some system of justice in place, it's complete chaos. So, and I certainly don't want to do that job. I don't want to be the police. I don't want to be the courts. I don't want to be the lawyer, right? I'm happy to have them do it. So I should show them some respect that they're actually out there doing it. And I think, you know, at least in the United States and Canada, which I can speak to with some knowledge, we have a fairly decent system of justice. It's just that the people don't know how to navigate it, right? And that's what we're all running into, is like, how do I deal with this monster that seems to not care about me? And so learning is the key, and that sort of brings me to where I start. So one of the things we need to understand is that law is layered. And if we back all the way up to what the supreme law of the planet is, we wind up finding this document called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And really the preamble to that document tells us everything we need to know about how to deal with one another. And let me just read it for you here. It says, the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights: whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. And it goes on, but that's the important entry. And then Article 1 is really all they needed to put in, because everything else they start to grabble meaning, right? But Article 1 is key here, and it says all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Okay. So there's a lot in that statement. It's assuming that you're endowed with reason and conscience, which means when you deal with a problem, you will deal with it using your reason and your conscience, and that you will behave in a spirit of brotherhood in everything you do. So when you're behaving in a spirit of brotherhood, you're not going to poison your brother's well. You're not going to drive your loud Harley Davidson past his baby's window who's sleeping. You're not going to speed through the school zone, right? You're going to control your passions, and you're going to think of the other person. That's the foundation of common law. The three unwritten principles, which are no violation of a contract that you sign with someone, no damage to property, and no injury to another human. That's really it. That encompasses it all. And when that's violated, then you have the right to pursue suit in a common law court. And that's mono a mono. That's me versus you, free of a lawyer, right? So lawyers aren't allowed to speak at those proceedings if you ever are lucky enough to get a common law proceeding. It's very, very difficult. I've yet to run into somebody who's managed one. I used to hear back in the old day that if all this stuff was true, how come it's not on the law books? And I'm like, then I learned by reading all of these laws that it is in the law books, and that when you enforce your rights, it goes away. There doesn't need to be a decision because the decisions have already been made, if you get my drift, right? So like, if you feel your rights are being violated and someone has brought a claim against you in court, and you can show that claim's not valid, it just goes away, right? Like the judge will dismiss it, the magistrate will dismiss it, or the person bringing suit against you will withdraw. Up here in Canada, it was really interesting of me to note that the Crown, who is like the state's attorney down there, may withdraw a charge at any time for any reason, and they don't have to tell you. And that happened to me a bunch of times when I was fighting cases that I really wanted to get in front of a judge, and the Crown would withdraw and they wouldn't tell me why. They just say, no, we withdraw the charge. And it's because they knew they had a losing case, right? And the last thing they want is, and this was all in civil courts, not in a common law court, right? So you can enforce your rights in civil law courts. But I'm sort of stepping sideways. I want to continue down this hierarchy of a law. So prior to the Declaration, and it's two covenants. There are two covenants. There's one on social and political rights, and what is the other one? Two covenants that are come along with the Universal Declaration, and a bunch of other stuff as well. But when the United Nations gets together in 1948 and signs this thing, it lays out your rights as they see them. Although I say Article 1's all they need. And that the signatory nations were required to represent those rights in domestic law. And we did that in Canada in the form of a constitution in 1967. They made a big dog and pony show at the time about look at this great prime minister. He's getting rid of the British North America Act and he's giving us a constitution. No, he was obliged to bring a constitution under the Universal Declaration agreement. And Canada had been a bit late to the game. It was 20 some odd years later and we still hadn't done it. Whereas the United States already had a constitution in place. And it's simply, I don't know if there were any changes made to it, but it might have been fine as stands, because all it did was bring that constitution underneath the UDHR. Most people don't know that. So the Constitution is the supreme law of land, but the UDHR is the supreme law of the world. That makes sense? And then it goes, and then everything steps down in jurisdiction, right? Down to your city code or your county. And so when you're looking to break the hold of a code, you can simply go to the superior law, right? it is, I heard it explained to me once, and I thought it was a great explanation, that your common law rights are whatever you say they are, as long as you don't violate the three unwritten rules that we talked about, and that a jury of your peers would agree with you. So in that system of common law, no one gets awarded $10 million because they spilled hot coffee on their balls from McDonald's. Because if you're on the jury and I make that claim, are you going to award me $10 million?
No, you don't. And the best thing about that is it's protection, because you're then going to be ridiculed if you're in the jury and you agree. You
Oh
will
yeah,
be ridiculed by society, and everyone's gonna be like, "What are you, an idiot?" Yeah. Oh yeah.
right. But that happened in a civil court, in a probably a state court down in, I forget, it was California or wherever, and a judge awarded that.
Mm.
So the problem with relying on the magistrate or the judge to make a decision is, when you show up in the morning and he's the guy rendering a decision against you, I don't know what happened to him last night. You know, he might not have got a good night's sleep. He might be a little grumpy. Maybe he's having a fight with the missus, you know, like, is this the guy I want responsible for my life and wealth? I don't think so. That's why it would be great if all courts were common law courts. But when we're not behaving in a spirit of brotherhood, do you really deserve a common law court? Like, why are you in court in the first place is a question you ought to ask yourself. Early on in this sovereign citizen movement or whatever, what I saw was a lot of guys trying to advise people on how to get out of something wrong they'd done. And that may have been a speeding ticket. And you have to ask yourself, if we didn't have code in place to restrict the idiot from speeding through the school zone, he would just make the argument, well, there's no law, you know, and yeah, I'll just peel the Star Wars lunch pails from my grill and be on my way, right? In the absence of an informed, intelligent citizen who understands what common law is, or a human being, then we need code.
Or just to cut in quickly, in the absence of a full-grown adult internally and externally, because what I see around me is a lot of people who look like adults, but internally they're children. So yes, I get what you're saying, but just to put it in layman's terms, in a funny way.
And I was that child.
Yeah, me too.
And they tell you that they'll treat you as a child the second you arrive in court. Now, I've never been in a U.S. court, but I've been in a Canadian court, and I can tell you the first thing that comes out of the judge's or magistrate's mouth when you arrive is, well, Mr. Max, how would you like to proceed? And I can tell you, having sat through many, many hours of courts of mine and other people's, that the look and the reaction of 99% of the people is this: I don't know. And at that point, the state's attorney or the Crown prosecutor is going to pipe up, and he's going to say how he thinks it should proceed. And you're going to look at him like that's the way the game is played. So, I guess he's going to tell the judge what to do. And you're just going to stand there like a deer in the headlights. So you have to have a plan. You have to know how you are going to proceed. What is I don't care what his plan is. What's my plan? How am I dealing with this claim against me? And that judge or magistrate is the arbiter between us. So I don't speak to my opponent. I speak to the person who's going to make a decision in the case. And if you have to deal in civil law, like most of us do, then that's the person you're dealing with, and you want to make your case to them, and you want them on your side, like as much as possible, right? If that makes sense. So navigating the law is partly knowing that game, right? I've won in court and lost in court, and I've won in court not because I had a greater knowledge of common law, but just because I understood how to work their system, through delays, using the same tactics as lawyers, and through getting lucky, the cop didn't show up in court, so the case gets thrown out, and sometimes knowing, having better evidence and knowing how to enter evidence. So in court, what we know is that when we go in and speak, that is hearsay. Judges make decisions based on evidence. So then that begs the question, what is evidence? And evidence is whatever he has in that little docket of his when he opens it. So if you go into traffic court for it and you have a speeding ticket, and he opens that docket and all he sees is the ticket and the policeman's report, then the bantering happens, the talk happens, and he goes, all right, I've listened to everything. I'm now ready to render my decision. He is bound by his position to only render a position or a decision based on the evidence in front of him, not on the hearsay. So he's going to go, you told a great story, Brandon, but I've got a ticket and a police report and I got nothing from you. Nothing. No affidavit, no counter evidence, nothing. And he may at that point, he's a human being, show some mercy to you. He goes, yeah, $3,000 is a bit excessive. I know that. So I'm going to lower the fine just for you to 2, and you can work it off if you want, right? So he's showing a little compassion for you, but he's also only doing what he's required by his position. So most people don't know that that's what evidence is. And when on Crow and things, when they talk about affidavits, that is evidence. It must be entered into court. And then you got to know how to enter it into court, right? You need to let your documents speak for you. So what I will do when I enter an affidavit into court and the judge asks me how would I like to proceed, I go, it's in the document, Your Honor. Well, yeah, but why don't you just tell me? I know it's better that you read it. And that gets things moving along nicely, right? So we have. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you have to sometimes, have you ever found the situation where you have to assert yourself 3 times before they'll proceed?
It's probably happened because I get very forceful but firm. But I didn't understand that that sort of rule in court. So it may have happened to me just without me knowing it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I hear you.
There's so much, right? I mean, there's just so much to know in the land of civil law and even in the land of common law, right? And when you're trying to enforce your common law rights, you're usually in a civil court, right? You're trying to make them go away and under the threat that you will take them to the next level. In Canada, the People's Court is called the Court of Queen's Bench. That's the federal court. And that's where you enforce your common law rights if you can do it. In the US, I'm not sure. I believe it's probably your federal courts. I'm not sure. Although your states have a lot more autonomy than our provinces do. Although I found it really interesting recently that I was reading a document that was issued by the province of something in Boston. I think it was Boston. I'm like, wow, they actually have the title province in there. That's interesting. Just because I didn't know, right? Like it's when you start to get into the multiple layers of government and each organization within, it's very confusing. So let me jump again over to documents, because this is how you learn. This is how I learned. And I went and got myself a Black's Law 4th edition. This seemed to be the edition everybody was talking about online. That was the one you went to for definitions. Then you need a good English dictionary, because when I say a word in English and you say a word in English, we kind of usually know what it means, but when we get to court, it's going to mean something else. And then you begin to unpack the UDHR, the Constitution, your federal laws and your state laws. You can begin to understand how they've worked the system over. And here in Canada, you can read an act, and you can go to Black's Law or a Canadian Legal Dictionary for a definition of what a person is. And then the act will say, at the preamble to the act will say, for the purpose of this act, the word person means the following. So they'll change the meaning of the word for the act. But then as you read further down the act, you'll get to a subsection where it goes, for the purpose of this subsection, the word person now means this. So when you're trying to create a legal argument, they're changing the meaning of words within documents, and it can get very confusing for people. And this is why lawyers are around, right? They're the word sorcerers, I believe the Bible speaks of, right?
Yeah.
How, in Orwell's 1984, it's about co-opting the language and changing the meanings of words so that the people are confused. They don't like, and that's exactly what happens when you start to unpack their written law. So in common law, you're using common English. In civil law, you're using their bloody legal dictionaries. And one great way I've stymied prosecutors is in Canada, it's required that when you're, I don't want to use the word appearing because you're not representing yourself. When you go as yourself to court, you have the right to understand what is coming against you. And so what I do is this little practice of I just start unpacking word for word what he's saying and going, I don't know what that means. I'm not a lawyer, Your Honor. So when he speaks in lawyerese, I don't know what he's saying. So I need the translation. So when he says the, what does he mean? And the word the means something different in law than it does in English. And in one sentence, you can drag this thing out forever to where they're getting frustrated with you. And the Crown prosecutor will say, Your Honor, I mean, really, and the judge will go, well, he has a right to know what you're saying to him, right? And you just enforce that right. I also find it very useful when I get into court to, and these are just tactics I use, right? And they know who I am. They know where I live. They know what my phone number is. They know what I do for a living. And I'm in front of them and they're sitting above me with all the authority that they have. I have no idea who they are. So I just slow things down when they say, how would you like to proceed? I go, hang on a minute. I'm like, you know who I am, but I don't know who anyone here is. So who is that? Who are you? Can you introduce yourself to me? And I point to the court reporter. They don't want to tell you what their name is, but I get it. Then I work my way all the way up to the judge and I go, and your name, sir, is? And they go, well, I'm Judge so-and-so. No, your first name. How do you spell that? And where might I find your place of employment, sir? Because in case I have to file an appellate, in case I have to file a claim in the appellate courts, I need to know where to send a subpoena to. So you sheriff, we have sheriffs here in court. I'm not sure if it's the same down there. Just slowing things down like that and watching the dance occur as they don't want to tell you what their name is. They don't want you to know anything about them, where they live, any of that stuff. You're unlikely to get their home address, but you can get their business address. And I mean, if you feel that a judge has overstepped his bounds, there's complaint procedures. And there's a great guy out of Vancouver that talks about the power of complaint in law and how these organizations that govern lawyers and judges or whatever have rules. And when they violate those rules and there's a complaint, they deal with it pretty quickly. So there are avenues. For instance, judges are required to behave themselves on the throne when they're sitting in court. They're not allowed to lose their temper. And you can call them on that. I've had judges scream at me and I go, excuse me, objection, Your Honor. Are you losing? It sounds to me like you're losing your temper. And if you are, that's going to affect your job. I'm going to have to ask you to recuse yourself and get someone in here who's more in control of themselves. And they will calm right down, right? Because what they know is you know that, and you may understand the power of complaint and put a complaint in against them. It was a real eye opener for me to find like I assumed as many people. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying this is great. Keep going. Yeah.
I assumed, as many people did, that these courts were the state. They were the government of Canada and the government of the province that I lived in. And it was an eye opener to me to find out that the People's Court, well, it was a court of the government, the Court of Queen's Bench. All of the lower courts were private. So we have provincial court, we have city court, we have family court. Those courts are private courts. And the lawyers and judges who work for private organizations that contract that work out. So the state contracts the work to these lower courts. That's how they're able to enforce civil law. And in civil law, they are king. They can do whatever they want. And if you don't know that your rights have been violated there, then you have no recourse. Your recourse lies in the higher court, always. So that was an eye opener for me. And up here in Canada, I found out the same to be true of Revenue Canada. This is our big income tax collector, like the IRS in the US. I thought that's the state. There's a Canadian flag on the side of the building. When I dug a little deeper, what I realized was that 50 years ago, the government of Canada contracted the collection of income tax, and only that, to my knowledge, it's just the income tax, to Revenue Canada, which is a private entity. Private entities are not transparent. Corporations are not transparent. They're not required to show us their books or what they do with the money they collect. And that the department in Canada that's responsible for taxation is called the Department of Revenue. It has a royal seal because we're still part of the British Empire and the Queen is our head of state. We are a constitutional monarchy. That blew my mind. I'm like, and these guys have all the force and power and authority of the IRS in the US. Like, they will take your home, they will threaten you. They came at me after I closed my business and told them, I got a letter saying I owed $100,000 in taxes. And I immediately phoned my accountant up and said, what's going on here? And she goes, they just do that to scare you. They were auditing me and they wanted me to sit up and pay attention that I was being audited. And I said, that's more money than I earned in the last fiscal year. How the heck can I owe you $100,000? I was a little bit trepidatious, as most people would be. So they use the law and then they abrogate their responsibility. We've elected these officials to do their job, and they've made it a money game, right? Like, so I don't know, out of every tax dollar collected in Canada, where it's going from Revenue Canada. Is what they give the government everything they took in? I bet it isn't. I mean, I would venture a guess that it isn't. And in the courts, are they behaving as the Constitution says they ought to? And the lower courts clearly are not. They're behaving according to the code that they have written. And common law is precedent and principles. Is precedent and principles. So, it's this big, but statute and code is enormous,
Yeah, I feel that's kind of how things work. It's what the simplest things are always what's true, and it's the complicated things that people have to hide. And I love that you're breaking it down to that, because I feel that what's going on is just an inversion, and there's some people who realize that if they could operate in this tiny space where no one's really paying a lot of attention until they become a part of it, and then once they get sucked in that system, they kind of just go along with it like most people do. And then they put, then there's all these TV shows telling you how it is, and when the TV shows are so fake. But that's how, if you even look at what's going on with the illness, the TV shows, it's what creates the zeitgeist, the culture, that we exist in, unfortunately. But I love what you said about the judges' behavior, because I remember dealing with judges before, and I've been yelled at, and I've always thought to myself, and even by police, and I always thought to myself, who is this person? Like, when I was in the Marine Corps and I was in boot camp and they were yelling at me, I got it. I'm like, his job is to yell at me because I'm a piece of shit and he's going to make me into a Marine, right? That's the mindset, whatever.
Right.
I get it. But then, like, I go somewhere and they're yelling at me for behavior. I'm like, wait, I still don't think I did anything wrong here. Like, and you're yelling at me.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love that you said that, because I hope I never have to use that. I'm just going to say that first. I don't want to put it out there, but just having that will give me confidence in the future to know that if anybody yells at me, I'll be like, oh, excuse me, hang on. Are you losing your temper? Because if you are, then maybe you should get someone else to fill this position.
Right. And always phrase it as a question, because first of all, it gives them an out, right? It's like, if you point the accusatory finger, it's like saying you're a liar. In court in Canada, I can't call you a liar unless I can prove it. But what I can do is I would suggest to you, Your Honor, that guy's a liar. Like what's Owen's phrase there? Could it be?
Could it be? Yeah, I love that staying in honor stuff. It's so key to this. And
it is.
Yeah.
It's very key. And so having lost my cool in court and got into screaming matches literally with judges and been surrounded by sheriffs, where if I'd have said the wrong thing at that point, I was headed to the pokey. You know what I mean? When I learned to keep my cool and stay my course, even losing, it earned their respect. They treat you differently, and they do this every day. That's what we have to remember. I mean, they play this game every day. You're walking into a field of play with experts at their game. They're going to use every trick in the book to upset the apple cart, to make you stumble, to make you fumble and fall. So when you get on a point, stick to it, because he or she, whatever the judge is going to try to subvert that and get you onto what they want to talk about. And there's a little thing where I never accuse a judge of this, but practicing law from the bench. Are you suggesting to me, Your Honor, how I should run my case, how I should make my claim? Is that what you're suggesting to me? Right? Because if you're suggesting that, that's practicing law from the bench, and you're not allowed to do that. Right? So, I mean, I was quite a long ways along my court experience before I felt confident enough to make statements like that. But you can certainly, they use fear and intimidation, and they will raise their voice just like a bully. And I've accused them of that in the sense that I go, it sounds like you're trying to bully me here. And I remember going into court one morning, and I wasn't feeling well, and I was asking for a continuance because I just got out of a surgery. And the second I opened my mouth and said, well, Your Honor, I'd like a postponement, I know exactly what's going on here, blah, blah, blah. And he started going off on it. And so you just sit there and listen, and then you go, are you done? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, that's not what's going on here. You don't know me and I don't know you. Here's what's going on. And he's like, oh, okay. But I tended to get the judges who knew me and who knew what I was up to. And they're always trying to stymie you, right? And the other thing is, in open court, like in an open traffic court or something like that, you're often there with many other people. And I used to go, just put me last, because I know they don't want anyone else to see what I'm doing. And I actually got to the point where I didn't want anyone else to see what I was doing in court, because what happens is people will go in and they'll see you do, like they'll get this brief snippet of time where they go, oh, I watched this guy get out of a ticket or something. And then they'll go try it and they'll wind up in more trouble.
It's like the Hermetic principle, to quickly break in here. It's just like sometimes knowledge or truth, it's not, people aren't ready for it yet. It could be one of the most harmful things for them. Yeah. It's like a weapon. It's like leaving a gun out and a kid grabbing that gun, where me and you can use it to defend ourselves from someone who's coming in. That kid is not gonna, do that.
Oh, and I've still shot my toes off a couple of times. I mean, it's their football field, I'm just a fan, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I get thrown in the game, it's like getting hit by a 300-pound tackler. It's like, oh wow, I didn't see that coming. They've got all sorts of tricks up their sleeve. So some friends and I decided a long time ago the best way to deal with these guys is the best you can fly under the radar and don't stick your head up like the whack-a-mole. The less you engage with the system, the better. But when engagement is required, then know the rules. And that is not an easy learning curve, right? And I've heard many people come on many shows, and the smartest ones will always tell you, go get the books. This is the only way to unpack this thing, is to learn it yourself. Go get the Black's Law Dictionary, get a law dictionary that's more current, that actually probably is the one used in your local courthouse. Get an English dictionary so you understand what the real word means, and then start reading these state laws, the international laws, and the Constitution, and you will begin to actually understand what those brilliant founders in the US wrote into the Constitution. Those words have deep and powerful meaning, and they knew what they were doing. Even if they themselves didn't always follow that Constitution.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They had the idea of it as a way to found a society. And it's really, when you look at the international covenants and the domestic ones, this cannot be based on anything but Christian law, right? It's there. It's the thing that a lot of the people have spoken about on law before and on hermetics and all these things, is like, everything's offer and acceptance in the law. All law is contract law at its heart. It's someone making a claim and you saying whether you accept or refuse that claim. So how are you going to handle the claim when it comes against you? And how are you going to issue a claim when you need to? And it's why the Bible tells us, because this is so complicated and confusing, it's why the Bible tells us to come to agreement with our adversary quickly on the way to the courthouse, right? You're going to save yourself a lot of grief by, and what do they encourage us not to do? Speak to the other party. Don't talk to them. Oh God, no. Then my lawyer fee goes right out the window if you solve this without me. Or, the judge doesn't get paid. The less people going to court, the better. So get yourself in a community where your neighbors like and respect you, and learn to live in that spirit of brotherhood. But barring that, I will just go through quickly here what I have on my hard drive of documents, and then some of them I have in book form that I have that people can start with. And of course, the first is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And with that, you have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Okay. Then you go into your national constitution, your state constitution, and you can start to unpack. I would start at the state level and then work your way up to federal, looking at just reading the laws and the acts and the statutes and however they're termed in your neck of the woods, and see if you can understand what's being said, and go through an entire act and watch how the language changes or how the idea changes, and how from one act to another they'll switch ideas on you just to keep you confused. One example of that we have in our government here is the word youth. Okay, so depending on which department of the government you're dealing with, a youth is defined as something different. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. Like, isn't it, if you're going to have a definition of a youth, shouldn't it be universal? And so the Justice Department will have one definition, the Welfare Department another, the Health Department another. And that's how ridiculously confusing it can get on something as simple as what a youth is. Right. And so you can understand that when you're dealing with a document that's got 10,000 words in it, it can get really confusing in a hurry. So those are the documents I would recommend to start with. And then I think maybe if you like afterwards, I can send a couple of websites to you where I think these guys are quite helpful at unpacking the confusion, and we'll go, there's one guy out of Quebec who's great at walking through law with his little whiteboard behind him and explaining what words mean and how the laws work.
Yeah, that's great. I could put the links to that under this show. So anyone where you're listening to this, whether it's YouTube or BitChute or wherever I seem to stick this, you could check that out, or go to More Laws, More Problems for those. And one thing I wanted to say too, it keeps coming up, and it's something that keeps popping into my brain as you're speaking. But I love what you're saying, Max, and I don't want to interrupt it, so it's great. But I do want to say that it's amazing how they put this international law into place, and it all seems to be true and aligned with God's law, karma, the natural law, these things you could say it's all in alignment with that. But then what seems to be going on by these institutions, allegedly, could it be, it seems that some of them are corrupting these laws and interpreting them their own ways.
Right.
And then when it comes down to me or you at our state or local level, we go in there and, we can't even really blame the lawyers or the judges, because technically at the end of the day, we're the ones walking into their system and agreeing to it. And if we don't know any better, even if they don't realize that's what's going on at a spiritual level, they're kind of free from natural law or karma because we're just walking into that system. Yeah. I mean, you should say that maybe they should tell us, but like you said before, maybe the knowledge of us knowing that would tear down that whole system. And if there's somebody who thinks that, wow, this system, as corrupt as it is the only thing keeping us from a Mad Max type civilization,
Right.
That's why you can't judge anyone else. Just to finish really quick, and then I'll let you go. But like, that's why tell people and advise to just fix yourself and then be an example to everybody else, and then they can fix themselves. But go ahead. Yes, I want to hear.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I agree with that. And it is, we do walk into their system. And I can tell you that I'm not saying I've never paid a ticket. I've paid tickets just to stay out of it. It's,
Yeah, exactly.
I have a license plate and a driver's license because I don't want to engage with the system that way. I don't want my car impounded. I don't want to have to go to court and fight that fight. That's a very difficult fight. Driving around with no license plate thing is going to attract some attention. I was wondering though, Brandon, if we could take a short break because I'm dancing like a man on the
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I need to go visit the men's room. I wasn't sure I was going to have to talk to him, but now he's just messaged me. So
okay, all right. I just started recording again, so that's perfect.
Okay.
So we had our bathroom breaks, everybody, and then we had our theological debate, and we just decided that we're gonna have a war tomorrow at dawn. We're gonna fight to the death, and whoever's right, his God is correct. No, I'm just kidding.
And as the challenge, I have the choice of weapons.
Yes, and what are those weapons gonna be? We decided we're gonna say on air.
Rotten fruit.
Yes. All right. Do we have to ingest it or throw it at each other?
Go as hard as you can. Right?
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just warn you, I'm a comedian, so I might have had rotten fruit thrown at me before.
Well, that's why I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So where I wanted to steer the conversation was, so I know you've had experience in court, Max, but the question that I'm sure everybody listening and watching wants to know is, what about the mask thing? So have you been in court? And have you had to deal with the mask issue? What has happened? Or have you heard stories that you can prove because it's people you know? Because that's all I like to talk about on the show.
Well, I have my own experiences. That's all I can speak
to.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
So here where I live on Vancouver Island, we're kind of lucky because it's less draconian than in other areas of Canada. We are on an island, like we like to say, this is an island in the Pacific and that's Canada over there, even though it's like 7 miles to the mainland. Or
humans, we're so fickle.
I do not wear a mask when I go into the grocery stores, and I often am confronted by the managers and security who are asking me, do I have one? Would I like one? I just say no. And if they get a little more intrusive than that, I say, listen, this is bordering on harassment. Mind your own business. You're not my medical professional and stuff like that. It's much more difficult in the smaller privately owned businesses. The ones that are suffering and stand to suffer the most seem the least willing to follow the mandate, because what we have in effect here is a provincial health mandate and a federal health mandate. That is not law. My constitutional rights protect me from mandates. Think of it more as a suggestion. We suggest, Brandon, that you wear a mask so that my grandmother doesn't die from the flu. So I have to, I'm not going to say I haven't worn one. I have, and I've worn it in situations where I've got to get by just like everyone else. So I pick those opportunities where I really want to make my statement in the big chain stores, that are essential to sell cigarettes and alcohol and all, fast food. These are our essential services. Okay. So I'll make a statement there. When I go into someone's smaller store and they're so fearful that for me to cause anxiety for that person is not me behaving in a spirit of brotherhood with that person.
Agreed.
It's like either don't go in or go in and be respectful. Right. And if they, you might want to start a conversation, which is a dangerous thing to do, about, how do you feel about this mask thing in your store? Oh, well, I wish I didn't have to. Well, what if I told you didn't have to, because there are businesses out there that are pushing back, and we need to support those businesses the best we can. Protesting doesn't do anything. Direct action is what does it. If enough of us say no, it goes away. And as the powers that be will do, they will get on the wave and ride it when that happens. They'll say, hey, look, everybody, masks are no longer necessary. Didn't we do a great job? And we all know it's baloney, but whatever, take your credit and have it like that. But I just recently traveled to Panama, and I was very lucky. So this is how it worked. I did not have to get a test to get on the plane, but I required one when I arrived in Panama. And so I did the nasal swab because I watched the guy do it. I examined his Q-tip, and I asked him how far was that thing going up my nose, and I grabbed his hand when he was doing it, and it only went up this far, and he just gave it a little wipe, and out it came. I mean, I'm not afraid that there's microorganisms on it or little metal things. I know I've heard all the stories or whatever.
Yeah.
But this is what I do for a living, and I have to travel. I thought it was ironic that they have the social distancing stickers on the ground in the airport, but we have a sardine-like packing on the airplane, you know, and the guys on either side.
That doesn't count though. If you just pretend that doesn't count. I just want to break in to say I agree with what you're saying with that, because I think there is a limit. It's just like I was saying earlier with balance. Sometimes we have to do what we have to do to survive. That makes sense. My thing is, I just want to exist. I'm not going to agree to nonsense. You know, if they just want to stick a thing up my nose really quick, because that 2 seconds will benefit you in a way that if you don't do it, it's going to destroy your way of life. Then that's ridiculous. You see
and
what I'm
don't think
saying?
for a second I didn't head straight to the bathroom and wash my nose out as best I could, and didn't let him put a lot of pressure on to damage the skin surface or anything like that on the inside of my nose.
But to think that if that was the route that they wanted to go, they could just put it in the water or the Coke, or they can. So
we're at the age of the mosquito drone where they can fly it in your window and curare you. I mean, like, you know, come on, right?
And I hate to say this, Max, but you know about that. So that means that just imagine what you don't know about.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. Exactly. So that's stuff like that.
So that was the trip there, Brandon. Okay. So on the trip back, the government of Canada was requiring the 3 major airports of entry, Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, that I, at my own expense, grab a hotel room for 3 nights. And then following that, do 14 days of self-isolation where I phone them like I'm phoning the school teacher every morning to report in that I'm still in my residence. So when I arrive at, first I get a test in Panama, you know, so I have the paper to get on the plane, and I arrive at Toronto International Airport, and I arrive at immigration. So it is my understanding that when I arrive at a port of entry, the only people who need to see my passport is immigration. So I show immigration my passport. They grant me access to my country, right, that I live in. I now come next to the Health Canada checkpoint. There's 3 Ontario provincial police officers there, 2 short ones and a tall one to balance those 2 out. And at the Health Canada girl's like, can I see your passport? And I said, what do you want to see my passport for? You're Health Canada. I have no business with you. She goes, well, everyone has to get a COVID test. I said, I already got one in Panama. I don't need another one. I'm here now. And she goes, well, you have to quarantine. I said, no, I don't. And to make a long story short, I went through the whole talk there. She had a claim against me, and she was trying to impede me from going about my business, that she needed to put it in writing. I needed to know who she was. Could I please have her name and her address? She didn't want to give me that. And, at that point, I was ready to bull my way through, but they said, well, we think you should go through immigration again. And I went, you know, I'm going to do that. I'm going to agree to that. And so we all walk over to immigration, and she says to me, now you have to deal with Paul. You know, and she points at this guy behind the thing. And I'm like, I wander up and I say, good day, how are you? He says, good, how are you? He goes, I understand that you wouldn't identify yourself. And I said, that's not true. You heard wrong. I identified myself when I arrived at the airport to you. And he goes, well, can I see your passport? I said, absolutely. I handed my passport. He looks at it. He goes, I'm satisfied you're not a foreign national. You're a Canadian citizen. Here's your passport. Welcome back to Canada. Have a great day. Right? And they're watching this.
That's
and
great.
I walk right by them and I go, adios amigos, have a great day. And I proceed past the police and Health Canada, which I could have done anyway. So I think I'm done. So down the stairs, I go to the main concourse level, and I'm greeted with another checkpoint. And this one's got the name of, I forget the name, but it was a corporate name. And there's all of these stations with guys and gals in blue plastic medical outfits with, you know, the hats. Man. And a sergeant from the Ontario Provincial Police grumping like, "Hey, this is the line for the COVID, in you go." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, thanks, buddy."
That's a checkpoint we call here in the United States. That's a LARPing checkpoint. Those
Right, a
guys were
LARPing
100% probably LARPing. Okay, proceed,
Right.
sir. That's beautiful.
So this portly little orderly comes up and says to me, "Can I get your passport? You got to get your COVID test." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm just going to be on my way." And he goes, "Oh no, you got to get your passport. I got to see. You got to get a COVID test." And so I'm like, "No, thank you." And I said, "Buddy, can you just not get in my way? Do you really want to make my day any more difficult than it has to be?" And he goes, "No, you got to do this." And so I'm continuing to walk through the checkpoint, and he's going, "Hey, Joe, this guy doesn't want to get a test." And I arrive at the very last station where there's 4 or 5 people getting their paperwork back to go stay at the hotel. And I say, "Excuse me." And they look at me and they kind of back up. And the guy at the checkpoint says, "Yeah, let him through." And off I went. And then I thought my ordeal was over, as I've only at this point identified myself to immigration. I will not give anyone else my ID unless they arrest me, and they were unwilling to do that. So that's how they give you the ticket too, is you identify yourself to them, and then they give you a ticket for not wearing the mask. If they don't know who you are, they can't give you a ticket, right? You have to agree to take the ticket. So then I have about a 4-hour layover till my connecting flight to Vancouver from Toronto. And I get at 5:30 in the morning, Air Canada opens. I go there, and I hand them my printout from the internet. This is my flight information. The guy says, "Well, I'm not showing you on the flight." And I go, "Pardon me?" And he says, "Well, did you change something electronically?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And he goes, "Well, it looks here like the airline that you originally booked with, which wasn't them, canceled your flight, probably because they thought you had to quarantine in Toronto for 3 days." And I said, "Well, I gave nobody permission to change anything, and I'm expecting you to honor this ticket." So I expect to be on that flight at 8:55 a.m. I'm very tired. I haven't slept in a day. What can we do? Didn't lose my cool, stayed calm. And he goes, "Well, I'm not supposed to do this, but I'll do you a favor, wink, wink, nudge, nudge." He was doing what he was supposed to do, honor the ticket, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I said, I thanked him for being a gentleman, and got the ticket and was on my way. So it was just that easy, right? It was about not feeling intimidated by the authorities, by the health authorities or the police who were there, and knowing what your rights are constitutionally. And my rights are that I don't have to identify myself to anyone at that port of entry other than immigration. And the same is true in the US. Why do you want to see my what business does a private corporation have with my passport? Right? None. They have no business with it. So that's how I handled that. And that's how I'm going to handle it again when I travel. So I get this, the swab's the only thing I agree to. I won't take the jab. If it comes to that, which I don't believe it will, then I guess that ends my international travel by air at the very least.
Yeah. What about the mask? Did you have to wear a mask on a plane at any point?
I did it because the stewardesses go insane. But what I do is first of all, let me show you. So take this.
They hate worse when you call them stewardesses.
Yeah.
The flight attendants.
Or the help, as I like to refer to them. Take this and cut that bit out.
Touché.
Cut this out, and it's almost like you're wearing nothing. And then when they go by, like I saw a guy on, I don't know, it was the Beartaria app say, I had a sucker in my mouth for the whole flight. That's what I did. Anytime they came by, I was just drink water or something. And when I'm asleep, they don't bother you. So I just pull it right off when I go to sleep. But
I like that. It's like adapting and overcoming, because I see what you're saying, because I don't want to wear the mask because I feel like it's like a lie. But then if it comes to the point where it's going to cause a scene and cause people to freak out, like at that point on a plane, I get it, man. You got to pick your battles.
As a Christian, I'm actually supposed to cooperate with the authorities as long as it doesn't violate God's law. And I believe in a way this does violate God's law. I'm with Owen on this, that the breath of life is the breath of the soul.
Exactly.
And it's also one of the 4 major ways we have in the human body of expelling toxins, right? So I don't want to plug that up. But I also don't want to cause any angst to my fellow passengers or to the staff I mean, who wants to have someone come into their place of work and cause a ruckus, right? There's a time and a place for that, and it's not on an international flight with some people who have no power of reason and are very scared. So yeah, compromise. There's nothing wrong with a little compromise in this world. Where I won't compromise, as I imagine you won't, is sticking something in my arm.
Yeah, no, thanks.
But,
I did that enough when I was in the
you've
military.
already pointed out they could deliver a bottle of water to me on that flight that's got everything they want to have in it to me. At what point do I let that fear go?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is more about a system of control, like a religion. If you just look at religion as a system of control, I'm not talking about a belief structure, just where they'll take a little bit of truth. So the medical industry is set up similar to religion. They take a little bit of truth where they do have a way to heal you, but they're not telling you how it is. They're not telling you it's the placebo of that white lab coat that is mostly healing, which is you healing yourself. So, and with the media, it's just surrounded, and everybody just gets steeped in it. So
the road to hell and bad morals is the death of 1,000 cuts. It's not the big stab in the heart that gets you. It's the 1,000 little cuts. It's the 1,000 little compromises of your morality, not necessarily the law, right? It's like, this is why God's law versus human law. I'll violate human law if I think it's that I'm doing the right thing, right?
Exactly.
I think that's a theme common in history. Is there's some great quotes that go along with that. I will not cut my conscience to fit the fashion of the day. My conscience is my conscience. I have to do what I feel is right. Behaving, once again, and I love this phrase, in the spirit of brotherhood, right? You're my brother. You tend to look at people a lot differently when you really adopt that as a philosophy, like that person that's yelling and screaming at you is your brother. What kind of day did he have? Maybe he's caring for a dying relative. Maybe she is dealing with an awful health problem. What compassion did I show in that situation? Or did I just react viscerally and physically? How dare you get mad at me?
Exactly.
No, we're supposed to control our passions and ask. You look like you're having a bad day, Brandon. What's anything I can do to help? That kind of an approach is much more powerful. It's the Christian approach. And
I found validation too, really quickly to cut in there. I found if you can validate people, it's because people in this society are so trained from birth, in my opinion, and this is where John Taylor Gatto comes in, to accept and look for all the validation from external sources. So if somebody comes up to me in a store and they're like, hey, do you have your mask? And I'm like, you're right. That's what I say to them. Like, oh, you're right. And then I would say, oh, I love to wear a mask, but I have a exemption that's totally legal. So it allows me to not have to wear one. But thank you for alerting me of that. I really appreciate it. It's totally legal. I'm here all the time. You can ask them. They know me. And then they just leave me alone.
Right. And Gatto nails that. I mean, he talks about the overlay of, look, I deal with this. I don't like to call myself woke. I just like to call myself a human being on a journey, right?
Yeah.
Trying to win for myself the undeserved kindness of God at the end of my life, because there's so much I want to do that I don't have time for. There's so much I want to learn that, school didn't instill that in me. The overlay of school is one of obedience and conditioning and programming. Television program, school program, government program, medical program. It is so hard for us to break out of that the Pavlov's bell thing is like, freeze, it's like, okay, and sometimes better that you did so you don't get shot. But that conditioning is so ingrained in us from the time we're very small, if we went through the school system, that it's very hard, even as an adult that knows, to go, break out of it. And some conditioning is good. Don't touch the hot stove, right? So there's a balance there too. But when it comes to the law, it's a very, very twisty river that you're on, and get on it at your peril, right? there, I know plenty of people who go along to get along because they've got kids to raise and a job to do, and there's nothing wrong with that. And they're good, godly people, or they're good atheist people, or whatever they are, Muslim. I was young enough and had the right kind of job where I could go to court and spend some time fighting it and learn these things. Most people don't have that kind of time, and you need that time to educate yourself. It's not quite as simple as everyone, write out an affidavit and go to court and enter it, and your life will be amazing. It can work. And it can work even if you don't know very well what you're doing. How is everyone's day in court? Like we were talking about, did the judge have a good day? Did the sheriff have a good day? Do you look like somebody he hates? I mean, these are things that can affect your day in court. So be careful is all I'm saying, right?
Yeah, that's really great advice. I think we can end on that note, because I feel that it's really important, because a lot of people, I'll just speak from my own experience. When I first came across a lot of this knowledge a few years ago, I started thinking to myself, wow, how can I benefit from this? What can I do? I could sue people. I could do all this stuff. And now I feel like it's more like, you know what? I'm just going to do my thing. And if somebody somehow bumps into me when I'm just doing my thing, then I will have a tool set to use. So it's good for me to know this, and I can stand on my own, especially when I want to get my own property and move on forward and do that. But that's where I'm going to come from it now. And if anyone's listening, I think that's the healthy way, because you don't want to go looking for a fight, because you're right. These guys do it all the time.
Right.
And if they sense that's what you're coming from, they'll know you're not being true. But if you're being picked on and you really are that, you're fighting Goliath and you really are David, they're gonna be like, all right, we'll let this guy through, I think, because he seems to know what's going on. But if you look like you're looking to just get money from SNET or like AT&T, no, they're gonna.
Yeah, and I would just end with two Christian principles here.
Yeah.
First, I think we discussed, I don't know if we were on the air when we did it, which is come to agreement quickly with your adversary on the way to the courthouse. And the second is, how many times are we supposed to forgive our brother? Right? It's 7 times 7, I believe, is the quote. So are you looking for a fight? Are you looking to sue? Are you angry? Are you upset? Or are you doing the Christian thing, which is forgiving this person for their trespass, for their, in the Lord's Prayer, it's not supposed to be forgive us our trespasses, forgive us our debts. I love that little grabble.
Yeah.
Forgive us our debts as we forgive the debts of those who are indebted to us, or however it's phrased originally in the Hebrew. It's like, isn't that interesting, right? So you owe me something, and I'm in a position to forgive that debt, right? It goes back to the Jubilees, right? Every 7 years, I'll tell you, you loan and borrow money differently when there's a Jubilee every 7 years.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's how I would end this, forgiveness first before you ever get into contention.
All right. Well, that's great. Some words of wisdom for everybody. And is there anywhere you want to put out if anyone has any questions or anyone wants to contact you? Or?
Well, I'm not, I don't know that I can help people too much on the law front, other than I just thought I could contribute to the conversation. But you can find me at www.thewarriorrising.com, where we're primarily about homesteading and building naturally and things like that.
There you go. All right. Well, if you guys are interested in that and you're listening, go there. What's the website again?
www.thewarriorrising.com. The website's new. We're putting out blogs, and we'll be building as we go. And you can find me on Beartaria Times App, The Warrior Rising.
Awesome. All right. Well, you guys know where to find me, morelawsmoreproblems.com. I am also on the Beartaria Times app as Bonanza Bear. So you can find me there, and or find me wherever. But thank you for listening. Make sure you hit thumbs up and subscribe. We'll talk to you guys soon. Oops, stop.